I fear that I might be in danger of talking over time, so we're going to do the best we can. Here, we want to talk to you a little bit about just team outreach in general, what you can do as a team, and our philosophy behind it, and our philosophy regarding competition, but also doing outreach and then excelling as a whole for a well-rounded team. So my name is Maya. I'm a senior on the team. I am this year's chairman's lead. I've been chairman's lead in the past. I've been doing outreach and chairman since my freshman year, and I've always been doing both. I'm also a designer on the team, so I've been doing both mechanical design and outreach, and kind of found a balance with both of those. So I bring a lot of experience to the table.
Mm-hmm. My name is Libby. This is my third year on the team and my third year participating in outreach. And this year is also my first year as a lead for an outreach program. So that's very exciting.
All right, so when I was thinking in making this presentation, I was thinking about how we talk about outreach as FRC teams. If you Google outreach, it defines outreach as an organization kind of going outside their own boundaries for the benefit of social welfare. And I think in FRC, we talk about that in the same context, but we don't necessarily define what it means or talk about what it means for different teams, because every team does different kinds of outreach. So for us, outreach is the idea around helping and benefiting others in some way, and that can be within our local community, our county, statewide, at the national level, and at the international level. So for our close community, some examples might be, we started our first FLL team a couple years ago, and then we since expanded that, and that's become our Davis Youth Robotics program, where we have elementary school curriculums implemented with our robotics program, individual leagues, and what we call robo-camps, of summer camps for students who are going to be learning with small robots like that. And then for what I called close partners, that would mean sponsors and what we call strategic partnerships on this team. So sponsors, any supporter of your team, or any person that can help you better the impact that you're having on other people within your community. Yeah, and for international at least, for us, that's the Compass Alliance, and we are lucky to be one of the founding members of the Compass Alliance, which is we call it the one-stop shop for FRC. It's an international organization for creating resources in PDF forms for other teams to use throughout the entire season. So learning about technical stuff like mechanical design, electrical, and then team structure and outreach, and specific things about how to pack for champs, how to organize transportation, and then call centers and resources for teams to find help where they need it.
So pretty much what we're trying to get at here is that a first team can do a lot more than just build robots. I know that first teams are required to build robots, but outreach is a side of first that's not necessarily required in the same sense that a robot is, but it's so important to a well-rounded first team to participate in outreach and just spread the culture of STEM, whether that be through first or not, and just do the very best that they can to be well-rounded, not just building robots.
Yeah, and I like to go back to, within chairmans and other places like that, we like to circle back to first mission and vision. And I particularly like first vision, which is transforming the culture of STEM appreciation. And that's what we center our outreach around. And I think that helps us connect more with our founding organization, which is FIRST, and how that means for our team and what our team goals are and what we want to do to our community. So impact them positively in some way within the realm of STEM. So why is outreach important? I'd say outreach is important because it helps your team establish a presence. You can build really good robots and only get so far to be a well-known team. You want to make your team known in the community, and the ways you can do that would be through social media, through engaging with your school, and through just making connections within your community. And that benefits your team because you're garnering support in return. So when you reach out to your community and become recognizable with your team logo, with your team activities, with your robot, you are making your team mission more known so that it reflects back to you, and more people know about you, and more people are going to be more inclined to support your team and support your programs.
Yeah, so when we're running our own outreach as a team, what we do to keep our programs understandable and keep their goals clear is to try to make each program aimed at a specific community need or at least opportunity. So an example of that would be, say you live in a town where there's just not a lot of STEM at all. There's more arts maybe, or there's just not a lot of interest in STEM. So then your outreach programs could be more aimed towards just planting the idea of STEM into people's minds as a viable option for them to pursue in their future, rather than very specific STEM-related activities that they can engage in. So an example of that would be, say you're in a community, there's lots of STEM, there are lots of programs that are available for young children, and you want to start a STEM program for younger children. So you're giving them specific opportunities that allow them to get engaged with something new. That's maybe your town has lots of sports, so you create a STEM program to sort of balance that out and give people lots of opportunities to pursue in their future.
Yeah, and the important thing for your outreach, I'd say, is to make it attractive. I think there's with especially engaging young students, like Libby was talking about, there are so many activities out there that kids have endless choices. So you want to make whatever program you're trying to implement unique and interactive and attractive for students to want to be engaged in. I think for a hot topic for FRC would be rookie teams and being able to support rookie teams, because I'd say it's one thing to be able to register as a team, but it's another to have to build your robot for the first year or for the first couple years and really try to get on your feet and establish a way to, with more people coming in, establish a way for that team to implement their own programs. And understand that your team, just in the fact of building robots, and if you've been building robots for a couple years, you have valuable resources that I think is your responsibility to talk to those rookie teams and help them in a way, because they come into FRC without a clue about how to build a robot, but also build it legally and be able to accomplish all the tasks that are demanded of the game that year.
Yeah, and so like Maya mentioned earlier, your outreach programs, they need to be engaging. I know a popular form of outreach is demos, and demos are great, but sort of the difference between demos and maybe a different kind of outreach is that with a demo, the audience is watching the robot, and it's inspiring and interesting, but some of the best outreach is something that the audience or the people you're reaching out to can get engaged, because it gives them an opportunity to really do something for themselves. It inspires them to want to try it again, to keep pursuing whatever they're interested in. And it's okay.
All right. So we lately talked about establishing a presence, and I listed off a couple things that you could do, but this is kind of a more steadfast way of establishing a presence right off the bat. A lot of robotics teams are affiliated with their school. Like, we're based out of Davis Senior High School. There's a bunch of other schools that feed into our team. But yeah, we're mostly based out of Davis Senior High School. And a big part of our outreach is recruitment. And I think team recruitment kind of goes unnoticed as like an outreach potential for you, but it's super important that you want students on your team that are going to be able to fulfill the goals of your team year after year, and you want to have that longevity. So having strong recruitment is super important for that. That includes advertising well, and advertising to your school or other areas that you want to advertise to, what your team is about, and that's advertising like what they're going to learn on the team, but also why it's important and the value of your team versus like what they're learning in school already. Because I think something that gets advertised for FRC specifically is like how teams are learning hands-on as opposed to sitting in the classroom and learning lectures and things like that.
Yeah. So a really valuable tool for your team in terms of outreach and a lot of other things is using your social media platform. So a lot of teams have social media accounts, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want, Facebook even. It's just a great tool to sort of create an image for your team that anyone can access, because you don't need to travel physically to speak to someone to tell them sort of what your team does. It gives a sort of preview of what you can accomplish. And then because social media can connect people, it's a great way to announce your outreach events that you're holding or any information you want to share with people, because it's just so accessible to everyone. And going along with that, your website can serve a similar purpose, but because a website sort of can hold so much more information, you can fit more words, larger photos, you can use it to get more in depth when you're describing your programs and the impact of them. And so that can give more information to people who are interested in joining an outreach program or participating in it. And it can also serve as a great tool to show sponsors what your team does beyond building the robot.
Yeah, and I think it's also, for me personally, it's super cool to have like a team view your own website, and like that doesn't make sense. Having other teams view your website, and you can post resources there, you can post all kinds of help there, because I visit other teams' websites all the time for reference information, for the resources, for past presentations they've done. So keep that in mind, because that's a platform that you can definitely use. Sponsorships are also another huge thing. Reaching out and finding sponsors is it's a necessity, I think, especially because teams have to be funded, and teams, it's pretty expensive to build FRC robots at this scale. And outreach and finding sponsors are interwoven. Sponsors are not just interested in the robot you're building. If you have a strong outreach program, several strong outreach programs, and measurable community impact, I think that's attractive to potential sponsors. And it's even easier to find a way to weave sponsors into those programs, because you then have a nice opportunity where you know that an organization is interested in your team and they're willing to fund certain parts of your team. Why not, give back to them in a way? So, involve them in community activities, like invite them to your shop, or things like that. All right, so I think the basis of outreach is, how can we meet real needs? And that's a question that you always have to ask yourself, especially as you are starting new projects, but also continuing older projects that you might have been working on for a while. You need to identify a problem or a potential opportunity. Both of those are going to be kind of integral to starting an actually impactful outreach program. And it's kind of a weird juxtaposition where it's okay to start small, but don't be afraid to be ambitious and to set large goals. My one, disclaimer for that would be, you need to set a game plan though. So start small, but then plan out and talk with your team about how you're going to be able to execute on these large goals. And then discuss certain project potentials within your team. I'd say, doing outreach is not a one-man band. You need to be able to have the support of the rest of your team. If you're a student on your team that's passionate about outreach, find a way to create a platform that is going to, help your team get behind a certain cause. And you need to ask your team, like, is this going to be feasible for us? Or if we plan a project in a certain scope, is that going to be, are we going to be able to execute on certain goals? So within the context of how many team members do you have? How many volunteers might you need for a certain, program? Say you're hosting like a women in STEM seminar that we do. We've done a lot in the past and we're currently expanding on. It's important to think about how many people you need to support that program. And if you don't have enough, lower the scale a little bit and work towards having, you need to have more team members interested in the program and then be able to host larger programs, if that makes sense. And then what are the potential positive impact. So why would you do this? Why would you think that this is going to be impactful? In what sense? Who is it going to impact and how? And then can you identify any potential risks? So, if something requires a lot of investment financially, consider that as part of the reason why you're starting. If you're able to execute on something with a huge budget, go for it. That's awesome. But keep in mind that if you want to fulfill that project's goal to the best of your ability, and if finances is what's holding you back, I would say lower the scale a little bit and then plan for the future about how you can expand on it.
Yeah, so as you're organizing your project, as Maya mentioned, it's really important to have a small team that is all collectively responsible for running the program well. So that means both students and mentors or adults, just because, the way we run it on 1678 is there's an outreach lead who leads the program, and then they can choose a few students to help them out or call for volunteers when they're holding their event. And then we have an outreach mentor who is sort of there to bounce ideas off of, to settle disputes, to provide some outside feedback. So once you have your group in place, you're gonna get together and you need to mark out your schedule and your goals. So when you're allotting time for an outreach program, it's best to not leave too little time and also not leave too much. Because if you leave too little time, you're gonna end up rushing everything. You're gonna throw it all together at the last minute. And the outreach program, it just won't be as well-rounded and complete as it could be. But then on the other hand, if you give yourself too much time, you give yourself, several months for a small event, for one thing, that might lead you to procrastinate a little bit. And then it also might cause you to lose sight of your goals because you have so long to think about it that you just sort of lose sight of what you need to do to get the program to run properly and the way you want it to. Okay, and then once you run your event, you have all your volunteers in place and everything's happened, you can't just stop there. You need to review your event. You need to think about what went well and what didn't go well so that in the future you can either improve things or continue to do things well. So we're going to go over this a little bit more, but after your event, you want to consider, were there some things that didn't go well that we can fix? And what things did we do well that we need to remember to keep doing in the future and maybe even expand more to make our event more memorable or fun or engaging?
All right. So where to start? I'd say a lot of common starting points involve team recruitment, and that's something I talked about earlier. You want to attract potential new members to your team, and how are you going to do that? It's through outreach. You have to be able to communicate with certain organizations like your school or other schools or any community-based or programs that might offer potential students that can join your team. Advertise to them well. You can post posters, you can do social media shout outs, other things like that that are going to make it known for your team that you are looking to have new members and looking to expand your program a little bit. And then local markets is another thing. At least in Davis, I'm not sure about larger cities or super small cities, towns. Local markets has been a huge thing that we started. It was our first outreach program. It's called Farmers Market. They're almost the same acronym, so I mix them up. Farmers Market, and we've been doing that since 2012 or 2011, and that was the first time that we realized that we can. That is so valuable to talk to members of your community just about what you do, because a lot of you hear the word robot and you're automatically going to get questions by your community. So take advantage of that. And what we do, it's every Saturday, and every in the summer it's Wednesday nights and Saturday mornings. And sometimes we'll bring our full robot. Sometimes we'll bring a little Vex robot. Or other times we'll just have 2 team members with their team shirts there to explain our program amongst the other community organizations that are within that market section. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry I stepped on you. All right, another, demoing robots, and that's something we talked about earlier, because it is it can seem like a one-way street, but it's a really valuable tool that you can use to start engaging with your community. And there are so many places, like just within like a small town, that would be interested in having a robot demoed, especially at like young, like elementary schools or like student organizations. For us, that means finding local summer camps that would be willing to host us for a day. At UC Davis, there are a lot of STEM summer camps, even like, I think they use some
Lego Mindstorm,
like Mindstorm, something like that. They're learning robots, and then you bring in a giant robot, and they're like just encapsulated, I guess, with just the complexity of the robot, and they want you to explain it to them for them to understand. And when you do that, you're sparking inspiration, and that's a super valuable asset to have for your team.
Yeah, so another way you can just sort of dip your toes into outreach if you're maybe a new team or you're not very experienced with outreach and you're not sure if you are ready to run a full-blown program all by yourself, is to just lend your team support and resources to existing programs. So maybe if there's a program in your town that accomplishes exactly what you want to do, there's no need to make your own version of it, because that just detracts from both of you. So you can just reach out to them and say, hey, we have the same goal as you. We'd love to help you out. We can do this and this and this. We can provide volunteers. We can demo our robot. So some examples of that here in Davis, at least, we have a STEM cafe that teaches senior citizens about how to use their computers and phones and such. So if we could send volunteers to help teach the classes, we could do that. Maybe one of our schools already has a sort of after-school robot club. We can go demo our robot. We can show them what our robot does, tell them about our team, just to make their program grow, and then also engage ourselves in the program.
All right. And sponsors, I think, is another thing that I like to talk about a lot. And it's important to first, be able to get sponsors and, start a relationship with sponsors. But what I think is even more important is maintaining that relationship. So how can you make sure that the relationship that you have between your sponsor, whether it just be financially, in kind, so like they're supporting you with resources or like bolts, or they're cutting metal for you, things like that. How can you help show them that their support is important to you? For us, that means a good example would be our 1678 sponsor open house, and that's in February. Our sponsors are actually the first people to see our robot functioning after build season. And we don't do any reveal videos. We'll do like autonomous, like censored and then uncensored autonomous routines. But we let our sponsors see our robot first outside of just our team. And that it's usually the weekend before we back the robot. And it'll be on like a morning where we invite representatives from local organizations. So for us, that's a lot of the deans from colleges. At UC Davis, there's a few like robotics organizations or robotics companies that will send a lot of their employees here, and then some parents that are affiliated with other organizations that might have sponsored with their organization. We invite them to, and we give them a tour of our facility, and then show them our robot, and then explain it to them. And especially if they're an in-kind sponsor, we explain the components that we've used and like the ways that they've sponsored us, and how we've been using that support, and how we're continuing to grow with their support, and how we're thankful for the support that they're giving us.
All right. Oh,
you can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So community relationships, it's sort of similar, but this just goes for if you are working with an organization or company to run your program, it's important to just sort of be friends with them, like be on good terms. It's not just you are partnering with them for them to give you supplies. It's like it's a mutual thing. You're both giving things to each other and supporting each other. So you want to like let them know that you appreciate it. You don't want to just call them once a year, say, hey, can we come to your shop and run our event? Thanks. So yeah, and then also going along with that, keeping your relationship strong can bring you new opportunities for other programs. Say your sponsor is getting involved with a new program. If you're close, they might invite you to come help out with that. And that's just all of a sudden you have this brand new opportunity that your team can capitalize on and grow your own program with that. Or they could give you a new idea for an outreach program that you could easily implement, and just boom like that, by having strong partnerships with your sponsors or whatever organizations you're working with. That can help your outreach grow in a huge way.
All right. And I think after this, there's going to be a slide about mentor and adult involvement. But for student involvement, I think it's super unique having students involved in like community engagement. If I talk to my parents, they'll talk about how they just did studying and they played a sport and that was it, and they went to college and then they had to get a job. But I think you're in a unique position as a participant within FIRST to give your insight and feedback to your team about potential new opportunities where you can incite change or help create a more like positive impact within a certain realm of your community. And I think that like students are oftentimes the ones that are more in tune to like their school and like happenings around the community than possibly adults, because students are the ones to be engaging in like after school activities and student government, other things like that, because that's important to them, but also it's important for the team that you're on to be getting that feedback, to be hearing that from their students and understanding what opportunities that a school or a local organization might give. And so like examples in the past, we've had Girl Scouts and then Scouts of America or Boy Scouts and then other after school activities. We've been involved with all of those, and it was super cool because we wouldn't have engaged within those organizations if we didn't have a connection. So it's for the students on your team who do have connections, keep that in mind and then bring it up to leadership or whoever is in charge of outreach if you have a good idea.
So adult support, it's really important when you're running an outreach program, even with the student leads and the students participating and running the program itself, you need to have an adult there just to like sort of provide more maturity. They're a lot older. They're sort of an arbitrator or a mediator if you have like disputes, if you need to bounce off ideas, and you need someone who can sort of see it from a different point of view than you, who isn't necessarily a peer in terms of age. Adults are also great for continuing projects over long spans of time. So students on a team, like the longest you'll be there is probably 4 years, but if you have a mentor that you know is in it for the long haul, they can really help to, for newer leads, to tell them about the history of their project, like what happened in the past, how it's gotten here, what they need to remember as they're growing their project in the years beyond. And then, yeah, just like I said before, people argue sometimes, and it's just usually having an adult there is better to settle arguments if you're just not in the right frame of mind to like calm down.
And I will say this is within the scope of our team. We're not telling you that you need to do this or you need to implement that, but this is what works in the past. And I think that we've learned from like past mistakes of needing certain support, especially from adults, in order to make a program more successful. I have a lot of experience with running outreach programs on my own, and I will say that it would have been super helpful to have a mentor there to be able to talk to them. And there are a very limited number of students that might have been on my outreach sub team, outreach group, that it would have been a lot better and a lot more stable of a program if I had someone to mediate with, someone to like help me give advice or they'll give me advice and stuff like that. That was horribly worded, but yeah. All right. And then another thing that I think is super important, especially for measuring team growth, is being able to document what you're doing. It's one thing to go out and volunteer at a shelter or something like that, but if you don't like keep track of the numbers and keep track of your impact and the people that were there and any photos that you want, it's going to be helpful for your team to understand within like longevity, understanding what this program was compared to previous years versus what this program was compared to like what is being documented in years to come. And the ways we do that our outreach documentation form, which I'll go into later, and Citrus by the Numbers, which is a spreadsheet database that we like to use. And especially for chairmans, because I'm involved in chairmans too, it's super helpful to have like special methods to document the things that we do. So it's easier for our chairman sub team to write with clarity and write with good, like honest data. We're not having to like estimate anything, because we can actually calculate the numbers of people we do, or numbers of people we impact on like certain aspects of different programs that we have.
All right, so this is a screenshot of our outreach documentation form. So it's especially useful when the lead of an outreach program is not at this specific event, if they can't do it for whatever reason. It's just an easy list that anyone can fill out that collects all the numbers of students, the numbers of volunteers, the numbers of just people that attended. And then it also includes some media guidelines, because having photos of your outreach is just as impactful as numbers, because it's like real proof that you can see with your eyes. You can see people smiling, have a great time. And then it's not shown on here, but there's also a spot to put feedback. So it's a good way to keep track of any feedback if someone notices as they're running an event, like, oh God, we did not bring enough power strips. They can write that down really fast, and there's no way you'll forget it, and then you have it for the next time you run your event.
Yeah, and I think this isn't specific to like certain outreach groups, and it goes for the entire team. And this is something that we just started implementing this past couple months when we started running our DYR tournaments or doing certain demos. Like, it's important for your whole team to understand the importance of outreach, and this helps prove it. If you hand them an actual piece of paper that says, I need you to collect like shots of this, and different like types of media, and be able to post that later on social media, and then have a certain member be able to track the number of people that attend. And there's different like data points that we'll have on here, but attendees, and then opportunities to write down and eventually communicate to someone else what they might want to change. And it keeps everything more team centric instead of like super small group centric, where these groups of students are working in a vacuum and the rest of the team doesn't know what's going on. When you hand someone a completed outreach documentation form as a member of an outreach group, you are then, I guess, like showing that you're able to communicate with others about the impact that you're having, and that it's going to like have value for the rest of the team. And then Citrus by the Numbers is a spreadsheet. It's an idea that I think I went to the chairman's chat in 2016, and Karthik from 1114 was talking about a database that they use to track everything that they do. And I kind of implemented that and wanted to do the same thing for our team, because we had been struggling with our chairman's submission that year of collecting actual data and making sure that it was the right data that we wanted, because there were different sources that we had that would say, oh, well, you know, we grew like 50% this year, but also another source says we grew 27% of, you know, number of students on the team. Like what's going to make it easier for your team to point to a certain number? And my answer to that is a spreadsheet. And this includes all statistics, I think. This is just a super small screenshot of it. It's like, it takes several scrolls to get through all of the things that are listed. And then what you can't see over here is that across this whole area on the screen is just years, and we do it by year. And then at the bottom, you can calculate, I guess, like change per year or number per year. And then across, you can, I guess, calculate things like the total number over the past couple years, or total number over this many years. And it's a quick way just to calculate and get an answer for a question that you're looking for. And what I meant by it contains all statistics, that bottom you're going to see like media appearances. Like, how many times have we had a mentor go onto Robo Sports Network and talk about our team, or like fun, like First Updates Now. We've had numerous students and mentors go on there. We want to keep track of that too. And then like things that we've lent out at events. So like here, when another team comes and asks to use our snap ring pliers, another member of our team knows to write down, hey, this team borrows snap ring pliers, and we can then, like for certain events, especially during like actual season, you get tons and tons of people who are coming to ask if you have a certain part, and if you track that and you show that you're actually helping other teams, even if it's indirectly just with tools or with parts, you can write it down, and that is actual measurable impact.
So the system of continuity. So you really want to focus on having your outreach be sort of long-lived. You want it to last for a while, because as you grow, as you go on, your outreach program will grow, and therefore it will become more impactful. So when you're creating, okay, let me back up right there. Okay, so yes, you want to plan your outreach extensively. So that means, like I said earlier, you're scheduling everything out, you're keeping track of everything you do. After every event, you review whatever you do. And so as you continue to do that, you build better and better habits and get more and more information on what you can do to make your program the best that it can be, and continue to do that for years and years. Another thing I want to talk about really fast is that you can do one-off events, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So an example of that would be like, for one day, you open your shop and anyone can come and just play with some robots for a day. So that's like a one-off event. Whereas a sustained program would be like our DYR program, where kids are involved for a full year, they can come back the next year, and it just goes on and on. So one-off events are good in that they're sort of quicker to do. You can plan them out. You just write up your plan, you execute on the plan, you review it and say, cool, if we want to do that again, we can. But if we don't, that's fine, because we're done. And then, whereas with sustained programs, you build on it for a while, and it's not really something you just stop necessarily. And so the sustained programs are the ones that it's sort of easier to see how they grow. Whereas with one-off events, keeping them sort of almost running one-off events continuously is almost more difficult than having a program that's designed to be sustained and extended. And so then that sort of ties into how it's not a one-man band, especially for both sustained programs and one-off events. You can't just run it as one person, because there's so much information that needs to be transferred and created and thought about. So it's important to have a team of people that can focus on making sure your event runs for as long as possible, and one person isn't overwhelmed by doing everything themselves. And so then leading into that, even if you have just one lead, you have a group of people that are working under you. And if the lead graduates, you need to have someone that can step up and take the job. So that means training all of your helpers really to be ready to take up the job of continuing the outreach program when you're not there, so that your outreach program doesn't suffer because one person who knew everything is suddenly gone and no one knows how to continue.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is reflected throughout our team and is reflected in a lot of other teams. One thing that we talk about within our own team and like to judges at competition is our peer-to-peer model, and that's applicable to both like technical teaching how to build a robot, but also like running outreach. Our peer-to-peer model functions around people who have experience in something. It's their responsibility to teach the newer members or members that don't have experience everything that they need to know. It's not, you can use mentors as support, but we like to maintain continuity within the student and the student body, so that knowledge is being passed down and like retroactively, like experience is being passed down, because you are learning from someone who had been on the team for 3 years before you joined. And in that sense, you're learning from someone else, and you're not having to go over bumps that were previously like hurdles that were previously jumped because you learned from someone else who already had that experience.
Yeah, so we just have a couple more things that we want to talk about before we can go into questions. Just like we've been saying all throughout the presentation, you really do not want to work in a vacuum, but that also means outside of your own team. So there are tons of FRC teams. So that means your team you can work with other FRC teams to grow your program more, to spread it over a wider region or area if you want to grow in that sense. Also, yeah, so doing outreach is never something you want to do to check a box or to look better for sponsors or to just increase your chairman's submission. Outreach is, well, okay, so first is always saying, first is more than just robots. And you should really take that to heart when you're doing outreach, because outreach, it's not really for you or your team, it's for the people you're doing it for and the people you're impacting with your outreach. And then last of all is, just like Maya said, outreach, it might seem like a huge, difficult thing, like, oh my God, we have to run this massive program, but like, you just want to start small, you want to do something, and then once you've just started, then you can start expanding, and it's so much easier. So just don't forget, don't give up on your goals, or don't shrink your dreams because you think you can't accomplish it. Just work towards it and continuously improve so that you're ready for it and you don't have to do everything at once. And then, of course, you want to have fun as you're doing it. Outreach shouldn't be like a job or a chore to you. It should be enjoyable, really, for you and for the people you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So as we go through questions, it would be helpful for us to get some feedback on what you guys thought of this workshop, positive, negative, and feedback. So you can scan this QR code and fill out the form that's attached. It would be super quick. But also, if you have questions, you can ask them now.
Yeah.
Yes. Community needs.
Yeah. Oh,
so you
want me to do this? Okay, yeah. So like we said, if your community has lots of programs for young children. So our town, there are a lot of sports. A lot of kids do sports. So we created our DYR program to give them a chance to get engaged in STEM. And so then as we create our DYR program, we advertise it really strongly to make it seem like a great option for kids to do. So that it's not just like, you can do sports or you can do nothing. There are like a myriad of choices that your kid can choose from.
Yeah. And I think more of a need, that was an opportunity. I would define that as an opportunity for us to implement a program, but I think a need actually would be the way that we implemented our Shelter Finder program. The programmers on our team a couple years ago started the idea of creating an app that's going to track the numbers of beds that are vacant in homeless shelters. And we have expanded upon that a lot, and just last year introduced it to the police department here in Davis, and are going to be partnering with UC Davis to be expanding to the entire Eula County to help police officers who have that app on their phone be able to find a homeless shelter nearby that has beds available for any group of homeless people that need shelter for nights or extended periods of time. So that was a need that we addressed with that project. Yeah. Yes.
How many people are on your team, and how many people are in outreach?
So we have this year 90 students registered on our team, and every student participates in outreach in some form. And we're not necessarily mandating that every student be meeting like extraneous goals, but some students are more involved than others. I'm involved in chairmans, and it's not required for you to be involved in chairmans, but it is required for you to be volunteering at our DYR events or volunteering at other outreach events that need support from the rest of the team. So yeah, you have lots of options with that. Cool. Is everyone done scanning? Or?
Yeah, and if you can't scan it right now, we're going to put it on our website at some point so you can come back later.
Yes.
Yeah?
Question for both of you.
Yes.
Because I know you guys said you guys been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What FRC game did you guys like the most?
It's a little off topic, but I liked 2017 just because I got to be up in the airship, and that was super cool because I was on the field. So Steamworks was my favorite.
Yeah, I think my favorite was this year's, honestly, partially because I got to drive the robot around, but also just like sort of like dynamic scoring, like it's not just doing an action, it's like you got to continue to own the scale.
Yeah. And I put my email address up here and our general Citrus Circuits email address. So if you have any questions, you can email either of these emails and someone will get back to you. For the Citrus Circuits one, it goes straight to our team captains and our lead mentors. And they're going to, send different emails, different directions based on the question that's being asked. I'd also like to mention this is the first time we've given an outreach presentation at fall workshops. So that's why I think we wanted you to fill out that form is because we had never given a presentation like this in the history of our team. All right, thank you. And we'll be here tomorrow. Both of us are pretty recognizable because we're on the field and in the pit. So if you have any questions, stop by.